After years of silence, a voice came out that no one expected. It was not from the media, not from a close friend, but from someone who had lived that story quietly. D'Angelo's own daughter, Imani Archer. For decades, fans had wondered about the man behind the music, the mystery behind the silence, and the pain behind the fame. And now, the truth was finally coming out. You won't believe how her story changed everything people thought they knew about D'Angelo. Let me tell you, it started with a secret that the world had almost forgotten, that D'Angelo even had a daughter. Imani Archer was the hidden chapter in her father's life. While millions admired D'Angelo's voice, his talent, and his passion, very few even knew she existed. Her childhood was nothing like what people imagined for the daughter of a music icon. There were no red carpets, no flashy gifts, no celebrity life. Instead, her world was quiet, distant, and full of unanswered questions. Her mother tried her best to give her a normal life, but how could anyone live normally when your father was one of the most mysterious figures in music history? This is how Imani's story began. Not with fame, but with silence. People saw D'Angelo as a legend, a man who brought soul back to life, but behind that brilliance was someone who was slowly breaking. Even when he was at the top, something about him seemed restless, like he was fighting a storm inside his mind. He hated interviews, avoided fame, and disappeared without warning. The world called it mystery, but for Imani, it was confusion. She grew up seeing her father not as a superstar, but as a man who kept drifting away, emotionally and physically. There were long days when she didn't hear from him, birthdays he missed, moments he never saw. But here is the shocking part. Even with all that absence, Imani never spoke with anger. Instead, she spoke with understanding. She once said that her father's biggest fight was not against the industry or the critics, it was against himself. She believed that fame gave him everything but peace. As a child, she didn't fully understand it, but as she grew older, she began to see the truth. Her father wasn't running from her, he was running from the noise of the world that refused to let him breathe. That realization changed everything for her. What makes this story different? It's not about a father who failed. It's about a man who was too human for the fame he carried. This is where it gets interesting. Imani started to see the two sides of her life, one filled with the love and admiration people had for her father, and the other filled with loneliness that fame had created. She watched people celebrate his genius, not knowing the pain behind his silence. The craziest part was, even with all the distance, she never lost her love for him. She would often say that behind every broken man is a heart that tried too hard to give. Those who knew her said she carried her father's soul, quiet, deep, and full of emotion. But destiny took an unexpected turn when she realized that her silence had become a burden too heavy to carry. For years, she kept her story hidden, staying away from interviews or the media. But the more the world talked about her father, the more misunderstood he became. Rumors painted him as lost, arrogant, or destroyed by fame. And Imani knew that wasn't the truth. She had seen the real man, the one who smiled quietly, loved deeply, and carried more pain than he ever showed. She wanted to tell the world that her father wasn't broken. He was simply human. And that's when everything started to change. When Imani finally decided to speak, it wasn't sudden. It was something that had been building for years, a storm quietly growing inside her heart. She had watched the world talk about her father, guessing, assuming, and twisting his story, while she stayed silent, protecting both her peace and his. But then, one day, something changed. She received a message online, a message that accused her father of abandoning her for fame. That one sentence hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't the first time she'd seen people talk cruelly about him, but this time, it felt personal. The world had no idea what really happened, and she realized that if she didn't speak up, others would keep writing her story for her. That was the moment destiny took an unexpected turn. So she decided to break the silence. There were no big cameras, no red carpets, just a quiet online interview. She didn't come to defend or accuse anyone. She came to tell the truth. And you won't believe how her words changed everything. With calmness in her voice, she spoke about her childhood, not as a tragedy, but as a journey of understanding. She said that her father loved deeply, but the world loved him in a way that hurt him. That single line spread everywhere. Fans who once judged D'Angelo began to see him differently. For the first time, people saw the man behind the myth. But here is the shocking part. Her honesty didn't just clear her father's name. It made millions of people rethink how fame truly destroys a person from the inside out. As her words began to spread, Amani noticed something strange. People she had never met were reaching out, other children of celebrities, young people who grew up under famous names but carried deep pain inside. They told her that her courage helped them feel seen. This is where it gets interesting. Amani's voice didn't just belong to D'Angelo's story anymore. It became a voice for anyone who had ever loved someone who couldn't love themselves fully in return. She wasn't talking about fame anymore. She was talking about humanity. But even with all the love she received, controversy started knocking again. Some critics accused her of trying to use her father's name for attention. They said she was turning his pain into publicity. But what makes this story different? Amani didn't fight back with anger. Instead, she spoke softly, saying, "I didn't do this to get attention. I did this to find peace." She explained that her story wasn't about exposing anyone. It was about healing. Sometimes, she said, the truth isn't meant to hurt people. It's meant to help us understand why they hurt in the first place. The craziest part was how her calmness silenced even her loudest critics. People who once doubted her began to admire her for the grace she carried while telling her truth. Soon, the conversation shifted from gossip to compassion. Social media started talking about D'Angelo not as a lost artist, but as a man who tried to survive in a world that demanded too much. Fans said Amani had humanized him, reminding them that legends also cry, break, and disappear when life becomes too heavy. You won't believe how her story touched people, not just fans of music, but anyone who had ever felt misunderstood. Still, through all this emotional storm, one question began to rise louder than ever. Why did D'Angelo really disappear for so many years? What happened during those silent times that no one could explain? When the world first noticed D'Angelo's disappearance, it became one of the biggest mysteries in music. Fans waited, begged, and searched for answers, but all they found was silence. No concerts, no interviews, not even a public sighting. Years passed and rumors started spreading like wildfire. Some said he had quit music forever. Others claimed he was battling addiction. But Amani, the one person who truly knew, finally revealed what was really happening behind that silence. And you won't believe the truth she shared. She said her father's disappearance wasn't about arrogance or fame. It was about survival. Fame, she explained, didn't just change him, it consumed him. After his legendary album Voodoo came out, the pressure around him exploded. Everyone wanted more music, more tours, more of his body, his image, his presence. But here is the shocking part. D'Angelo never wanted to be seen as a fantasy. The famous How Does It Feel music video, which the world praised, became a curse for him. People stopped listening to his music and started obsessing over his looks. The industry turned his art into an image he couldn't escape. Amani said her father once told her that fame made him feel trapped in someone else's skin. He didn't want to be a fantasy, she explained softly. He just wanted to be human. Those words broke people's hearts. Behind the smooth voice and the soulful performances, there was a man losing himself. This is where it gets interesting, because while fans thought he was hiding from fame, Imani revealed he was actually trying to find himself again. She described nights when he would sit alone with his guitar, playing soft tunes no one would ever hear, just to remember who he was before the world demanded too much. As a little girl, Imani didn't understand why her father came and went like a ghost. Sometimes he would show up full of energy, smiling and talking about life and music. Then, without warning, he'd disappear again for months. She remembered birthdays that went unanswered, holidays that felt empty, and nights where she wished just to hear his voice. But she learned later that her father's absence wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he was fighting to stay alive inside. The craziest part was that the same music that made him famous was also the thing that hurt him the most. Every time he tried to write or record again, the pressure of perfection pulled him back into darkness. According to Imani, her father's silence wasn't weakness, it was resistance. He needed to step away to survive, she said. He wasn't just battling addiction or depression. He was trying to reclaim his soul. Fame had taken control of his identity, and walking away was the only way to get it back. Destiny took an unexpected turn when those years of quiet started healing him in ways that fame never could. Imani said she saw him start to rebuild himself slowly, one song at a time, one breath at a time. He began remembering what music meant before the world complicated it, before it became business, before it became an image. But even as he healed, those years left deep scars on both of them. Imani described her father as a man who carried too much light to survive in a dark world. She spoke about visiting him during his lowest moments, when his eyes looked tired but his soul was still gentle. Sometimes he wouldn't talk at all. He'd just listen to music, lost in thought. Other times, he'd tell her stories about old soul legends and how their music carried pain that the world never saw. It was then that Imani began to understand her father in a new way. What the world saw as failure, she saw as survival. What others called retreat, she called healing. And when D'Angelo finally came back to the public eye years later, releasing Black Messiah, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a rebirth. Imani said it was the first time she saw her father smile with peace in his eyes. He wasn't singing for fame anymore, she said. He was singing for truth. But let me tell you, even with that return, the pain of those lost years never fully disappeared. There were still things unsaid, questions without answers, and wounds that music alone couldn't heal. Yet through it all, Imani found understanding, and that understanding became her strength. Years later, when Imani looked back on everything, the silence, the pain, the chaos, and the comeback, she realized that her father's story was never just about fame or downfall. It was about a man who dared to walk away when the world demanded his soul. You won't believe how her perspective changed everything for fans who once judged him. She said that growing up as D'Angelo's daughter meant learning to love someone who was both a hero and a human. The world saw him as a legend, but she saw the man who sat quietly at night, staring at the stars, trying to find peace in a noisy world. But here's the shocking part. Imani revealed that her father's struggles didn't end with his return. Even after releasing Black Messiah and being praised again, he carried guilt inside him. He often told her that he wished he could have been there more, that fame had stolen years he could never get back. She said he once told her, "Music gave me everything and took everything at the same time." That confession shattered her. It was the moment she truly understood that her father wasn't running from her. He was running from a version of himself that fame had built and he no longer recognized. Imani admitted that forgiveness didn't come overnight. There were days she still felt angry and nights she cried thinking about the years they lost. But what makes this story different? She chose healing over bitterness. Instead of blaming him, she decided to honor his journey by sharing it with honesty. She started speaking at youth programs and mental health events, talking about how fame, pressure, and perfection can break even the strongest souls. This is where it gets interesting. She turned her pain into purpose. People started calling her the voice of silent daughters, those who grew up loving broken fathers who were never fully there. Through her words, she rebuilt not just her own image, but her father's too. Fans began writing letters, saying her story helped them reconnect with their own parents. Musicians talked about how D'Angelo's silence now made sense, that it was never abandonment, but a necessary pause for survival. And destiny took an unexpected turn when Imani received an invitation to speak at a music tribute honoring her father's legacy. Standing there with his songs echoing through the hall, she didn't cry. Instead, she smiled, knowing that the world was finally hearing his truth through her voice. She ended her speech that night with words that would stay in everyone's heart. My father wasn't perfect, but he was real, and sometimes being real costs you everything. That line brought the crowd to tears. In that moment, it wasn't about the fame, the controversies, or the headlines. It was about love, loss, and redemption. The craziest part, Imani realized that even though her father's journey had been filled with chaos, it gave her the strength to find her own peace. So when people ask her today if she misses him, she simply says, "He never really left. His music still speaks, and through his silence, I learned how to find my own voice." And that's how a story once filled with controversy turned into a legacy of healing, a reminder that behind every broken melody lies a truth the world needs to hear.